Consciousness is a state of being when an individual is awakened to their place, historically, culturally, socio-politically, and spiritually in the diaspora.
That's a good question. For me, when you grow up privileged, and anyone who hears me talk, they like immediately assume I'm not from Detroit because of how I sound, right? Like you have a private school accent, and I'm not hiding it. It's how I talk. So when you grow up privileged, there's like kind of a two-track way that you're taught to think about your privilege. You're either taught this like perverted side of the talented 10th, where because you were born into privilege, you're supposed to like help other people get out of their situation, right? That's one track that a lot of people tried to like force onto me and friends of mine when we were young. There's the other track where it's immerse yourself in what's going on. Don't pretend to be any better than anybody else, get it through the mud just like your parents and grandparents did. And that's the track that I gravitated to because probably for toxic masculine reasons, I didn't want to be seen as like someone who just had it handed to me. So for me, the way I've always wanted to improve things is by getting to actually know it. Part of my job as a journalist is hearing people's stories, like being in their spaces, but not just like being in their space to like extract, but like being in there to give, right? Like I'm giving you a platform to tell your story. I'm just the one typing it up, I'm just the one getting it on camera. Like you're advocating for yourself. I don't have to advocate for you. So I've always wanted to improve things by being a storyteller, whether it's journalistically, whether it's poetry I write, whether it's screenplays and short stories that I started doing in college. I always wanted to make sure that I was telling stories that felt very real. So almost all of them are, if not based on someone, are inspired by someone I have had deep conversation with, or they're inspired by an issue that I see that is very pervasive. One of them in Detroit is transportation and lack of access to public transportation. So when I eventually came back to Detroit as a journalist, I had really been on the police beat when I first came to BridgeDetroit. We launched 2020, so my first day was like the first day of the George Floyd protests here. So that was the only lens I was kind of like writing from for the first good chunk of my time at BridgeDetroit. When I started doing public transportation, I thought, oh, this is a way to get to like a more immediate need that isn't always a hot button issue, right? Like when I was covering policing, everyone in every state, in every major city was talking about the problems with American policing and racial tensions. So it felt like I was jumping on a bandwagon, even though I had covered it before in Grand Rapids. But when I was able to do public transportation, it felt like, here's something that has, in Detroit in particular, every bit of the same racial injustice that we see in policing present here, and no one is connecting the dots for people that don't rely on mass transit, or rely on public transit, I should say. So for me, I've always been interested in telling the story of, helping people tell the story of what that looks like on a day-to-day basis. Like, what does that look like when you need to use the bus to get to work? And in this city, it looks kind of bleak, If you're waiting waiting at the bus stop for 45 minutes for a bus that doesn't show up, how do you plan around something that's not reliable? And helping other people, especially advocates and people that didn't necessarily call themselves advocates, but wanted to share what they had to say and share what they experienced. I think that's like one of the coolest ways you can improve your immediate surrounding. And then the last thing I've done, not the last thing, but one of the more recent things I've done, I taught middle school for a little while. I taught at Verner Elementary, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math. Then I taught at Burton International, 6th and 7th grade English. And it's like you have a direct influence on a bunch of young people that can't even articulate some of the problems that they see every day or that they come into contact with every day. And if you can give back to people when they're young and give them things, not just tell them what to do, but like teach them how to think for themselves, they'll carry that for the rest of their lives. You know, long after they forget about what paper I assigned them, they'll remember, oh, he taught us if you know how to argue and advocate for yourself and write and communicate with others, you can accomplish a lot of things.